好啦，差唔多，唔該，唔該曬大家。
Thank you all.
歡迎各位出席今日嘅。
Welcome to today's press conference. We have with us the speakers on stage, Ms. Bernadette Linn, Secretary for Development, Mr. Andrew Lai, Director of Lands, and Mr. Ivan Zhong, Director of Planning. Secretary will first give an overview of the land supply situation in the past year, and then she will brief you on the land sale program for 2023-24, and then the floor will be open for questions and answers. Secretary. Good afternoon. As the financial year is coming to a close, let me first give you an overview of the supply of residential as well as commercial sites in the private sector. In this financial year, we put up different sites to meet the development needs of various types. Together with the fourth quarter of the land sale program, it is estimated that 16,050 residential flats can be produced, and this is in exceedance of the private housing target of 12,900. So we have gone 25% above this figure, and this is also the second highest among in the past 5 years. That is comparing to 2021, about 19,000 flats came on stream, and that also showed our determination in enhancing the speed, quality, and efficiency of land creation. As for commercial sites, as you can see this figure here, 164,800 square meters. That includes the fourth quarter land sale program. Regarding a site at the Sai Street, the tender will close by tomorrow, and if this plot is also sold, we will be able to reach this number. And as mentioned just now, in terms of private housing land supply, we managed to reach a high figure, 16,050 flats. Now, if I may, here is the breakdown of the flat numbers. As you can see, a large number of flats come under the redevelopment projects. So that's 3,840 and 1,600 from the railway development projects. Now this shows that overall speaking, some projects have gone beyond our expectation. In the beginning of the year, we expected that from the private development projects, only some 4,000 flats could be produced, but now we see 8,000 flats produced. As for commercial land supply, as mentioned just now, there are 3 sites, and the tender is in progress for the third site. As I said, it will close by tomorrow. For the 2 other sites, commercial sites, in other words, in Anderson Road, to cater for the needs in the area. So that's for the land supply situation in this financial year. Next, may I turn to the 2023-24 land sale program. Broadly speaking, we are going to put up 12 residential sites for sale to produce 9,120 flats. We also have 3 commercial sites available to provide 201,730 square meters. For industrial sites, we're talking about modern industrial buildings. We have 3 sites for producing 170,000 square meters of gross floor area. So let me analyze the use, the 3 major land uses here. Now for residential sites, the government land sale program will cover 12 sites. including sites as mentioned in the Chief Executive's policy address last year. One of the sites will be made available for a starter home project. For another site, the site will be sold to a private developer on the condition that the youth hostel will be built on the same site. The Director of Lands will walk you through the details in due course. But let me just explain that 9,120 flats will be produced from the 12 sites in the government land program. And this is a new record since 2019-2020. This is an important figure. Together with the 4,500 flats to be produced under railway property development projects, we're able to produce the number as a result of the sites in the government land sale together with land created for the purpose of railway development. As I mentioned just now, in terms of the source of land supply for redevelopment and private development projects, there may be fluctuations year on year which are beyond our control. As a result, in our estimated land supply, we must place significant emphasis on government land sale as well as railway property development projects. As for the 3 commercial sites, as you can see here, there are 3 sites, one in Kai Tak, another in Wan Chai, which is the ex-Wan Chai Police Married Quarters, and then the third one, Queensway Plaza. This will be redeveloped into a commercial site. It takes time to construct commercial buildings. So we must not only have regard to the existing use of the commercial site and the current economic situation before deciding whether we should put up commercial sites for sale. For the purpose of promoting economic development of Hong Kong in the future, we must be prepared. Next, industrial sites. We're going to include 3 industrial sites in the coming year's land sale program. They will be put on the list. They're capable of providing about 170,000 square meters of gross floor area. You may recall in a few months ago, we explained to the electrical panel that in terms of the first batch of sites near Yuen Long Industrial Zone Estate, there will be modernized industrial buildings, and also the 2 sites in near Hong Shui Q. We expect to introduce them gradually next year. Well, this is for the purpose of supporting high value-added industrial development, including logistics, as well as automobile maintenance. Top-notch enterprises will help us build multi-story buildings to accommodate brownfield operations. As explained to the electrical panel, we expect that 30% of the floor area will be used for the purposes I mentioned, and the 30% GFA will be handed over to the government for engaging suitable non-profit making organizations for operating at a concessionary rent for accommodating brownfield operators. With concessionary rent, they will operate for about 5 to 10 years during the transitional period. Because of the importance in terms of the policy objective, we will put up these 3 sites for sale in the coming year. And in the short term, as I mentioned, conditions will be imposed, and then another round of expression of interest will be kick-started so that we have a good grasp of what conditions to be imposed in the land sale program. And I'd also like to explain the following, as it is important to develop modern industrial buildings. In the next financial year, every year, we will add a new category to the land sale program, that is industrial sites. In the past, we didn't announce well beforehand. We only disseminated this information when sites became available in the same quarter. But like other sites, in the beginning of the financial year, we'd like to explain to the public our work in relation to the provision of industrial sites. Now, as you can see, we have this list here, and we usually set out the sites for sale for different purposes, and we usually divide them into two periods, the first and the second half of the year. And yet we've also received feedback that it may be confusing for the public if we divide the period into the upper and the lower half of the year. According to experience, instead, it was more accurate in terms of information disseminated on a quarterly basis. So based on this feedback, we're not going to divide the period into the first and the second half of the year. Instead, we just put all the sites available for sale on the same list, and then on a quarterly basis, we also publish another list to explain to the public about the sites available.
明年
So just now I have explained to you the residential and commercial sites available for sale next year. And also I have provided a breakdown on the residential site uses. Now I would hand over to the Director of Lands, Mr. Andrew Lai, to explain the source of the residential sites. Thank you. Good afternoon. Now for the new fiscal year, this is the residential site supply situation. There will be 12 residential sites for sale with an estimated yield of 9,120 flats. So that is a 5-year high. It shows our efforts to enhance speed and quantity. Among the 12 sites, 6 were rolled over from this year's land sale program and 6 are new. In general, the 12 sites are very diversified. Geographically speaking, they are located all over the territory. They are from 2,000 square meters in size to 5 hectares. And also there are low, medium, and high development and intensity. These sites can fulfill the needs of different buyers of flats, and it will also meet the needs of developers of various scales. Specifically, there are 2 residential sites on the Hong Kong Island. We are all familiar with the site at Cape Road, Stanley. The second one is the smallest site with 2,000 square meters in size, which is the high intensity development area with 400 flats yield. That is the Siding Street site. In Kowloon, there are 2 sites. Kai Tak Area 2A2 and 2A3 near Kowloon City, and Kai Tak Area 4B5 near the former runway area. They are for high density development with 1,000 flats yield each. New territories, there are 8 residential sites. At Changsha Lantau Island, there are 2 sites for low density development. Number 7, the site at Castle Peak Road, So Kwun Wat. That is also a high density development with 1,600 flat yield. Number 8, Chun Wan Yao Gam Tau. It is the largest site with 5 hectares in size among the 12 sites, offering the highest yield. That is some 2,000 flats. Site number 9 in Sai Kung, sites number 10 to 12. They are located in the new reclamated area in Tung Chung. This is the first time we are putting up sites for sale from this new reclamated area. In terms of the estimated flat yield, the supply is even. Now, besides the Hoi Sha Path sites with 50 flats yield, There are 5 sites offering 100 to 500 flats and 6 sites offering 500 flats or more. Now, the larger site, Tsuen Wan Yau Gam Tau, it will yield 2,000 flats. Now, thanks to the efforts of the Planning Department and the Development Bureau, save for 1 site, the other 11 residential sites have completed OZP amendment procedures and are ready for sale. The remaining one is the one in Clearwater Bay Road in Sai Kung. Now, there are 2 sites with new land sale conditions besides the usual one. The first one is the site at Yau Gam Tau Tsuen Wan. It will be for the starter homes project. Now, the starter homes project has been offered before. The first one was at Anderson Road, which is in construction. According to the Housing Bureau, a second project will be in order. So we think, in terms of the location and also the scale, Yau Gam Tau Tsuen Wan is a suitable site. Now, this is an aerial photo. The location is near the sea, and it is very favorable. In terms of the specific land sale condition, we will announce them later. The second noteworthy site is the site for youth hostel. The Home and Youth Affairs Bureau is responsible for the youth hostel scheme. Previously, we converted sites from existing facilities for youth hostel purpose. Now we are adding this condition to the land sale condition of the Tung Chung Area 1068 site. This is the first site put up for sale from the newly reclaimed area in Tung Chung. The flat yield is around 500. Now we request the private developer to offer youth hostel accounting for 10% of the GFA on top of the private flats offered for sale. Now, when the details are hammered out by the HYAB, we will add the conditions to the clause.
Apart from the 12 sites in the land sale program, in the new financial year, the MTRCL will undertake 3 railway property development projects to produce 4,530 flats. As for the detailed implementation timetable, the MTRCL will make an announcement in due course. The Urban Renewal Authority will also roll out 3 projects to produce about 2,200 flats, all in Kowloon. Now, what is worth mentioning is the first one, Sheng Tak Street, Ma Tau Chung Road in Kowloon City. This is a co-op building for civil servants. You may recall a few years back, the government invited the URA to look into the potential of redeveloping co-op buildings. And this is the first project to be rolled out of this nature. Apart from the land sale program, the MTRCL railway property development projects, and the URA's redevelopment project, private development is also a key area. And in the upcoming program, we take away the highest and lowest of the 10-year rolling average, and then we take an average of the remaining 8 years. And if in terms of projects subject to lease modification, about 2,600 flats are estimated to be produced. As for those not subject to lease modification, some 2,100 flats will be produced, since the developers will have less restriction. Altogether, the annual forecast is 4,700 flats. So that's the latest forecast. As for the first quarter of the land sale program, I'll give the floor to the Secretary. We're approaching the end of February. Very soon, we will see the beginning of the next financial year, which is in April. That is the first quarter. So let me also explain to you the land sale program in the first quarter of the next financial year. We're going to put up for tender 2 sites, one in Tsuen Wan and the other in Kennedy Town. Altogether, they can produce some 2,400 flats. For the Tsuen Wan Yau Kam Tau site, as I mentioned just now, this site will be used for the development of a starter home project in the first quarter. The Housing Bureau is ironing out details which will be announced in due course. Apart from these 2 sites under the government land sale program, as far as we know, for private redevelopment or development projects, in the first quarter, for projects subject to lease modification that can be completed in the first quarter, some 360 flats can be produced in the 5 projects. So altogether, private housing land supply in the first quarter will stand at 2,760 flats. As for commercial and industrial sites, we will put these sites up for sale in the remaining quarters of the next financial year. Now, before we open the floor for questions, I want to emphasize that the government will continue to expedite the progress of land creation and housing supply, and will also continue to provide and maintain a sustained steady land supply. We'll also take a comprehensive approach and take a multi-pronged approach to increase land supply to meet the social, economic development needs and housing needs of the community. And we welcome questions. Please, before you ask questions, introduce the media outlet you represent. This reporter, I'm from Cable. Now, the forecast is that in the coming year, some 20,000 flats will be produced based on the land to be supplied. This is an increase comparing to this year, but the market sentiment seems quite lukewarm. Why is the government confident that the target can be reached? As for Yau Kam Tau in Tsuen Wan, this site will be used for starter home project. Is it because you want to keep the land price low to make sure it can be sold? And for the commercial site at Mong Kok Sai Yi Street, the tender of which will close tomorrow, are you worried that the tender will be aborted again? And if that is the case, are you going to lower the evaluation of the site? And after tenders have been aborted, shouldn't you wait until market sentiment improves, or you consider dividing up the sites into smaller ones before you put them up for tender again? A number of questions. First, in recent months, the market sentiment has been such, and we're asked whether this would cause our concern in our upcoming tender exercises. We're not worried because the objective is to maintain a sustained source of land supply to the market, and we must not relax our effort simply because of market sentiment. We must also have regard to the policy objective. But of course, if there are changes in the market sentiment and the economic situations, the bidding price will definitely be affected as well. And in any event, we sell our plots having regard to the market situation, and the prices are reasonable. We are a policy bureau. We have policy objectives to have regard to. As for this site in Yau Kam Tau, Tsuen Wan, it will be used for a starter home project. Are we trying to lower the price to make sure it can be sold? Of course, it is not. In the upcoming land sale program, we want to set aside a site for the starter home project, leveraging on the private developers' capability to achieve this policy objective. We are working towards achieving this policy objective. Of course, the potential bidder will have regard to our conditions as well. So we put our policy as our priority before setting the price. Now, as for the Sai Yi Street site, the tender of which will close tomorrow, what happens if the tender is aborted again? Now, the tender is still in progress, so I should not speculate. There are different factors affecting whether the site can be sold. For example, the interest of developers in the site, their views on the economic outlook, and also the features of that particular site and the conditions attached, the financial position of developers, etc. These are all factors at play, so I should not speculate. You ask about the tender being aborted again and whether we will divide the site up into smaller pieces. Now, we need to consider the features of the site before deciding whether it can be divided. If it's a small site, it cannot be divided. For example, for Sai Yi Street site, apart from commercial uses, it will also provide other facilities in demand, such as GIC facilities and a public transport interchange. So these are all factors that we must consider. Of course, we'll have regard to the circumstances of each and every site, and we do want to sell each site successfully.
Next question, please. Hi, I'm from Hong Kong Economic Times. Now, you said the land supply next year will be the most in history, and so it gives you much confidence. So starting next year, there will be land for sale from the reclamated sites in Tung Chung. So how many flats will be yielded? Now, will there be more sites available from the new development areas, say in Tung Chung? Are you confident that the supply will remain at a high level for the next few years because of that? Now, about the starter home project, the Yau Gam Tau site will yield some 2,000 flats. Can you give us more details? Say, for example, how many of the 2,000 flats will be starter homes and how many will be private housing? Now, for the URA development site, there is the Dakshing Street site. The government mentioned that there would be starter homes supplied from that site. So how many starter homes will be available from that site? And what is the government's target of starter home supply each year? And what will be the split between starter homes and private housing? Concerning the flat yield from the Tung Chung site, I would invite the Director of Lands to answer the question. As for the number of starter homes yielded from the Yau Gam Tau site, please bear with me, I am not able to give you an exact answer. The Housing Bureau still needs to hammer out the details. Well, the first starter home site at Anderson Road was the first site where we put up the land for sale, and starter homes flags were provided by the private developers. So we would make reference to that project. We included requirements for the private developers to offer a set ratio of the flags yield to be starter homes, and there was specific requirements on the number of small and medium-sized flags, and also loss was strong. So maybe some of these conditions would apply to the Yau Gam Tau site project. Later on, when the site is put up for tender, the Housing Bureau will make more announcements. In terms of the redevelopment project of the co-op, civil servants co-op site. It is one of the two major projects being followed up by the URA. For the other projects, OZP amendments procedures are being completed, and there are still negotiations ongoing. The URA will consider how many flags would be used for starter homes. We have not set a hard target for the URA in terms of the number of starter homes produced, because there are financial consideration to be taken. Director of Lands, please. Thank you. On the list, 3 sites are from the newly reclamated area in Tung Chung, that is Area 106. All 3 sites are near the shore. We will adopt a stepped development approach, so the building height limits would be lower near the sea. The flex yield will be 400 to 500 for each of the sites. What about the total number? So 1,200 units in total. Next question, please. The gentleman in the back.
English questions from RTHK. So with several tenders falling short, is the government confident that all sites offered this year through the land sale program can be sold? If yes, what is the strategy to ensure all of them can be sold and that the revenue generated will meet expectations? And second is on the starter homes plot in Chun Wan, Yau Gam Tau. Why is it the most suitable plot to do so, and when will there be a more concrete plan on that? Thank you.
The first question is about how confident we are in having the sites included in the land sale program successfully sold. First of all, we cannot guarantee that all the sites on the land sale program will be rolled out in the coming financial year. We have always stressed that by having the sites included in the land sale program, it signifies government's intention to get ready those sites for disposal when we are ready to do so. But whether they will be disposed will also depend on the supply from the other sources, like the sources from the redevelopment, because we count all sources together to ensure a balanced and healthy supply. Of course, when we decide that certain sites should be rolled out, and we have those announced before the quarter of that year, we do want those sites to be successfully awarded. That said, the tender process, it takes 2 to tango. It's not just government's intention. The developers will also make their own decisions as to whether the sites are attractive to them and whether they fit into their individual investment policies and their financial situation, and also their outlook of the economic development and the prevailing market conditions. But we make our best endeavors to make the tenders work. As regards your second question is about the site for the starter homes, the site in Yau Gam Tau. That site will be scheduled for disposal in the first quarter of next year. So by the time of disposal, we will release the tender conditions, and those tender conditions will of course reflect Housing Bureau's intention regarding how the starter homes should be built, including the minimum floor area to be dedicated to the starter homes units, and also the size of the starter home flats, the pricing, and also the eligibility criteria of the buyers. So I'm sure as the Housing Bureau is now working on the conditions, they will make reference to the first pilot project of this kind in the Anderson Road successfully sold. And they will also give an account of their final decisions when they are ready.
好，下一條提問。
Next question, please. The gentleman in black in the first row. Secretary, good afternoon. I'm from Hong Kong 01. 3 questions. Now, the commercial site at Kwun Tong belonging to the URA has its tender withdrawn. Why are you still putting up 3 commercial sites up for tender under this land sale program? Why are you still so confident? And also, there are 3 industrial sites for tender, and they have been awarded to foreign investors before. Now, are you worried that you may have to put national security clauses into the tender documents, and will it affect the response from foreign investors? And why don't we see the site at Kutong North put up for tender in this land sale program? What is the progress? 3 questions. Now, the commercial site at Yuman Square belonging to the URA had its tender withdrawn. Why are we still putting up 3 commercial sites for sale this year? As I've mentioned in my opening, we cannot simply base our decision on the prevailing market sentiment. When the site is awarded, it will not be several years' time when the GFA is finally completed. Now it is the time when we are pursuing economic growth. We must prepare for the future. Otherwise, it would be too late when we put up commercial sites for sale in a few years' time. We will be losing out on the potential and the opportunities by then. You have to consider that the GFA will not be available immediately once you put up the sites for tender. And there are individual considerations behind the decision. For the site at Kai Tak, that is part of our CBD2. There will be more commercial sites available under the land sale program in the coming years. We are talking about some 900,000 square meters of GFA. And it is impossible for us to put it up for tender in one go. We have to roll them out in an orderly manner. So we think this is an appropriate arrangement to include it in the land sale program this year.
The second site is the X1 Chai Police Mary Quarters. And if you know the history, you should know that there have been hiccups. The relevant OZP was the subject of a judicial review case, and the case went on for a decade. Now that the judicial review case had come to a close, and we believe that time is ripe for this site to be put up for sale. For the third site, Queensway Plaza, rezoning was completed in the end of 2016, and recently we also completed the relevant statutory procedures relating to the realignment of roads. As you know, the site is government-owned, is leased to a private developer for the purpose of running the shopping mall. Now, we have already told the public that the site would be put up for sale, and I believe that we must not drag on our feet, in all fairness. So these are the considerations behind the 3 commercial sites. Second, you asked the national security related conditions to be imposed in the land sale program, and that the prospective bidders should not breach the national security law. We believe that this will in no way affect the interests of private developers. We believe our private developers to be law-compliant organizations, and as such, they should not be worried about the relevant conditions. And in fact, the reader also indicated that their interests would not be affected by these conditions. and we have sold sites since the introduction of the policy. As for the site in Kutong, now through the in-situ land exchange arrangements concerning private developers, we consider a number of applications. These are sites subject to lease modifications, and if these cases are successful, it will be reflected in the outcome. Now, for government land sale program, we have sites not subject to lease modification or in situ land exchange. So once land resumption has been completed, the sites will be put up for sale. Now, for the Kutong site, at the initial stage, public housing will be produced. For private housing, as I explained just now, after going through the lease modification and land exchange procedures, they should be ready for sale. Another question from Hong Kong Economic Journal. Good afternoon. I have a number of questions on the 3 commercial sites. In particular, the Queensway Plaza, where you have tenants and you have the developer managing the premises. Is there any idea when they should vacate the site and terminate the tenancies? The site will be put up for tender in your land sale program, but how soon? Can you tell us? And about the commercial site in Kai Tak, in the past, the tender was once aborted and the deposit was confiscated. Now you're putting up the site for tender again. Are there changes to the terms? Another question on Urban Renewal Authority. The tender for the Kwun Tong site was aborted, and according to the Urban Renewal Authority, they would like to include residential elements in the originally planned commercial site. And what is your view on their proposal? Are you going to support the URA? And there is also this project in Nga Chin Wai of the 3 projects in the coming year. And there have been discussions with the URA. May I know the progress of this project? Will it be an open tender, or will the URA be directly collaborating with a private developer? There are 3 questions. First, about the Queensway site. We've included this site in the upcoming land sale program. So we must assume that the site will be made available for sale next year. In other words, we should start negotiations with the tenant, that is the developer leasing the site from the government. But details are to be sorted out by the government property agency and the other party. And it's not for me to say, but all in all, the tenancy arrangements will tie in with the land sale program. As for the Kai Tak site, you do have good memory. Indeed, tender was aborted for this site, and as such, we made an application with the town planning board for the site to be converted into a residential site, to no avail. The town planning board decided that since it's a site on its runway, it should have it would be more compatible to keep it as a commercial site with the surrounding area. Now we're putting this site in the land sale program again because it's been some time and the market sentiment may have changed, so we'd like to try again. But if you want to further divide up the site, I don't think there is much room to do so because this is not a particularly large commercial site. As for Yuman Square, in Kwun Tong, the URA's commercial site was not successfully tendered. Now the URA is proposing to include residential elements in their project. They have yet to finalize the details, but at this initial stage, the government keeps an open mind about the URA's suggestion. But let me also say that it's not the case that after each unsuccessful tender, we must make adjustments to our original proposal, because there may be different reasons why the tender hasn't been successful. That may have to do with, for example, market outlook and market sentiment, which may change after a quarter. Now, if we are to adjust our proposal after each unsuccessful tender, then we will be unnecessarily disrupting our supply of residential and commercial sites. We must be careful in considering the reasons behind. Last question. I'm from AM 730 about youth hostel scheme in 106A. You mentioned 10% of the site. Does it mean that some 50 flats can be set aside as a youth hostel? Will you impose conditions, preliminary conditions on the percentage of flats? Will it affect the bidding price? When will it be made available? And for Kennedy Town, this site is high density development. Would it affect transport and traffic there? And also for land resumption in Kwu Tung, can you tell us more details? First, about the youth hostel scheme in Tung Chung 106A. It's a mix of residential flats and youth hostel units. We're working with the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau, and we're inclined to take this approach because we need to have residential flats, and that means leveraging on private developers' capacity in producing the flats as well as the youth hostel. And after completing the construction of the youth hostel, the government will then take possession because it's government property, and then it's for the government to invite a non-profit making organization to operate the hostel. As mentioned by the Director of Lands just now, the preliminary proposal is that 10% of the GFA will be set aside for the youth hostel. But ultimately, the exact number will have to be decided by the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau, having regard to the size of each unit, because you're given 10% of the GFA and you need to do some calculation based on the proposed size to come up with the number of flats. But broadly speaking, 10% of the site will be used as a youth hostel, and after completion, the site should be handed over to the government. Once ready, this site will be rolled out. I'm afraid we don't have a timetable. In relation to Kennedy Town, the residential site for tender in the first quarter, at this stage, we are putting up the site for sale, and the impact on transport and traffic should not be something we need to consider now, because we've gone through the relevant statutory town planning procedures and the relevant impact assessments should have been conducted already. But of course, when construction actually begins, local communities' concerns should be expressed, and our colleagues should continue to liaise with the community.
About the figure, if I remember correctly, there are 6 applications for lease modification, which we have accepted for further consideration. If they succeed, there will be another 8,000 flags supplied. So like other modification or amendment items, they would be reflected in the column of a private developer modification. Thank you for attending today's press conference.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.